I just want to say thank you to everyone that liked and commented on the video, on my last video, the discussion. I didn't expect it to get any views actually, so I'm just glad that you guys enjoyed the discussion and some people commented on it and joined in and talked about their feelings about Vanguard a little bit. So it's just nice because that's exactly what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to make a community of people that love Vanguard, that love Deer Day 2. The ultimate goal, okay, the ultimate goal is to eventually have a Vanguard Deer Days 2 tournament that can be streamed or somewhat. So if you guys want that to happen, if you guys love Vanguard, love Deer Days, love talking about Vanguard, then please consider pushing that subscribe button. Pushing the subscribe button is the main way to support me. It's the best way to support me. So let's get into it. So all right. So what's been on my mind recently in terms of Vanguard? Since the last video, I've been thinking about Vanguard Zero, and I've been watching a lot of Vanguard Zero content. And I've been thinking about the comparisons of Vanguard Zero to Deer Days. Like, what was the better online platform for Vanguard, for people to get into Vanguard? Now, there are a lot of pros and cons to each. Because Vanguard Zero, let me first talk about Vanguard Zero. Vanguard Zero came out during the pandemic, kind of like in the midst of the pandemic, in the middle of it, and it was this free keyword on free Vanguard simulator for mobile devices. And at first it started with the OG original Vanguard, like just the Nova Grapplers, Royal Paladin, Kagura Genesis, and then it branched out, ultimately ending in the G era. So in Vanguard Zero, you had this chance to play throughout all the eras of Vanguard, whether you played through them or not, but you get to play through Legion, you get to play through Break Ride, you get to play through Limit Break, all of those fun mechanics that have released in Vanguard in its in all of its years, how the game has changed. You kind of grow up, change with it, right? As the pandemic was changing, the game was changing, and you were changing with the game. And off that fact, I love Vanguard Zero. Like I said in the last video, I love the old aesthetics of Vanguard and all the old units, but a lot of units I met for the first time. Like the Bluish Flame Liberators. Oh my god, those were such cool key units to me. Liberator as an archetype, I never knew Liberator had existed. Vanguard Zero is where I fell in love with Spike Brothers. Spike Brothers became one of my favorite clans because I was actually able to play its mechanic, and I could do that many attacks with Bloody Ogle, Dragger combo. Like, it was really cool. Tachikaze, I played Tachikaze for the first time. A lot of clans that I played for the first time was because of Vanguard Zero, and I love that about Vanguard Zero. And also a big thing about it was that it was free. The freeness of it was really great. So because it was free, there were game modes that you had that like the championship game mode or the tournament mode where you can get gems or tickets or whatever. And then you had the legend ring system. Unfortunately, there weren't that many game modes. Most of it was just play somebody else and then make a deck and kind of do some like free things to get the decks, like trainings and trying decks out and stuff like that. Ooh, that was a big one. That was a big one. When Vanguard Zero first started, you could try out every single deck and it give you a little bit of gems for it too, for trying out the deck, and that was so cool. So Vanguard Zero had like some modes, some interesting things, had an interesting crafting system. It was free. You were pretty much going through all the history of Vanguard up into the G era, and that was great. Striding was fun. Being able to use all the cards that had existed since the beginning of the game at the end of G, that was fun because it put so much creativity into the decks and so much variance because you could use anything. You can use all these cards that you collected, they're still good in the G era. So Vanguard Zero was a great time, but it did have a lot of negatives as well. One, the gacha. The gacha was terrible. Not since the beginning of the game, because it had a pretty generous crafting system at the beginning of Vanguard Zero. But once it hit G, oh my god, the GRs pretty much GR rarity single-handedly ruined the game. GR rarity single-handedly ruined Vanguard Zero. Every deck became super expensive to build, and in order to get the main decks from the sets, you have to pay money. Like, there's no choice, you have to pay money. And then the free decks, they were nice, but still they were such a grind to get. And then they made getting packs way harder. And then they made it where you can't even reuse the packs from month to month. Like, once a new pack comes out, you gotta get a whole new pack of packs in order to get, like, they were specialized. So before, you could just use all your gems for whatever pack, like a Master Duel, but now you have to use the specific pack for that one in the G era, which was terrible. It was terrible because people had to, if you were a free-to-play player, then you might as well just pack it up. Tournament mode is not for you. Alright, every single mode, championship mode, not for you. Playing competitive, fuck you, dude. But it was still cool. Even despite all that, you were able to make some interesting stride decks. I still was able to make the Blaster Blade stride deck. I remember that. But I never was able to play Chrono Jet or Asha or any of the super popular stride decks. I always had to play like some rogue Captain Night Mist. I played the Captain Night Mist stride, and that shit was fun. I'm not gonna lie, that shit was actually pretty fun. But that was Vanguard Zero. And then another big negative with Vanguard Zero is some of the cards, some of the units themselves, their effects would change to fit how Vanguard Zero was played, because it wasn't played like regular Vanguard. Some effects became on hits, and those on hits were so terrible. A lot of the clans that suffered were Nova Grappler. Nova Grappler was one of the main suffering clans because all of their effects became on hits. And if you're at 5 damage, if the person has 5 damage, if they had guard, like any amount of guard, then you weren't hitting. And none of your effects will proc. And it got a problem when people started sending out 4 intercepts instead of just 2 intercepts. You can't do anything because your on hits aren't activating because you have to hit the Vanguard. But you can't hit the Vanguard because all these intercepts are in the way. Well, okay, why do we have to attack the intercepts? That's not in regular Vanguard because there is no guarding in Vanguard Zero. There is no defense phase for the opponent, so it makes games feel less interactive. And even watching the game back, the game just feels less interactive on that level, and that's a big thing for Vanguard, the interactivity of it in the battle phase. But the battle phase, the only thing that could protect you were grade 2 rear guards or special rear guards that had intercept, right? They can intercept from the back row. The drive checks didn't go to your hand, they went to the bottom of the deck, which was also really annoying. Playing regular Vanguard, having the drive checks go into my hand, such a godsend, such a great mechanic. And thinking about how it never went into your hand in Vanguard Zero is just like, damn, like, yes, I understand why that is so fucking annoying, dude. Even putting the grade 3s as triggers, that's fine. But the drive checks, because they still had cards that said this card, like how many I just drove check and then stand me. But you couldn't because maybe you're doing triple drive, only one card is coming to your hand off of one draw trigger. So, and because of that, it really centralized how people do triggers. So mostly every deck was forced to run 9 triggers, 9 draws, because draws were the best thing in the deck because they actually give you some card advantage, and not every deck can just naturally get card advantage. But that was Vanguard Zero. Despite all that, I had a great time with Vanguard Zero and playing with all the decks that I missed, playing with Blau Kluger, that was one of my favorite decks. Beast DD, that was one of my favorite decks. Captain Night Mist, that was a cool deck. Bloody Ogle, that was also a cool deck. I could just keep going, listing decks from almost every clan, right? Blade Wing, that was a good deck. Anyway, there was a lot of cool decks, and then going into the, like, let's say I play Blau, right? So if I play Blau, every single era of Vanguard, maybe there wasn't like specific name Blau support, but like in Legion there wasn't specific name Blau support. But in Break Ride we had such explosive support that you could carry that into Stride, and then Stride Blau gets more support, and like damn, like that my personal play strategy is being supported like really well. And it felt like when new clans would come out that I would like, it was like I had to get it. I had to spend money. Like Vanguard Zero is the only mobile game to ever get me to spend money. But that was before the G era. Before the G era, I was like, when Liberators came out, I was like, I had to get them. I had to get them because I love Old Paladin, and Liberators are doing everything that I want Old Paladin to do, and it's a really cool deck, and I love it, right? And there are just some decks like that. There are just some decks like that in the clans. For me personally, where I'm like, that mechanic is way too cool. I want to play it. I'll spend money for it. And so that was Vanguard Zero, and it was a shame that it died how it did, but we had a lot of great memories with it. Dear Days, Vanguard Dear Days 2. Dear Days is a whole different experience. It really is a whole different experience from playing Vanguard Zero, because this is more akin to how Vanguard is played in the TCG than Vanguard Zero ever was. So if you were to make comparisons with Yu-Gi-Oh!, Dear Days is more like Master Duel. That's hilarious sentence. But Dear Days is more like Master Duel, and Vanguard Zero would be more like Duel Links. So in Dear Days, you don't have as many decks as you did in Vanguard Zero. Some of the decks do exist, like Royal Paladin, Kagero. I'm not talking about encounters, I'm talking about vintage mode. So there is a vintage mode in Dear Days where you can play the classic decks. However, it comes with a caveat. And let me just go out and say it right now. The biggest con with Dear Days 2 is the price. That's the biggest con. Dear Days 2 should be discounted or just free, because there's not much to do in the game anyway. There's ranked fights, there's vintage fights, there's story mode. The story mode is boring as shit. I'm not gonna lie. The story mode is boring as shit, but there's a couple challenges that I'd like to do, maybe a speed run, whatever. And then there's ranked fight and there's free fight. The way that these fights operate, they're so slow. They're so fucking laggy. They're so fucking glitchy. And even when a fight, like, it's so far between that a fight just works. Like a fight just like works perfectly without there being any heavy lag spikes. But because of that, because of the game, it takes like an hour to get through these fights, and that's crazy. Because when you're playing it, it feels, faster. But as you guys can see from my videos, they take a long time. And I even 2 times speed through the fight because of all the thinking time and all the choosing time. You have to choose every little thing. Because the fights, the way they get the game is built, the fights go on for a long time. 40 minutes to 30 minutes plus each fight. And that's if you're getting demolished or not. They just take forever to get through, right? Which that sucks, because in Vanguard Zero you can pound out like 30 fights in an hour, right? In Dear Days 2, you'd be lucky to get 2 fights in an hour, because this is another thing. Nobody's playing Dear Days 2. Which maybe is not a con in the game itself, but maybe it is because of the price. Because the base game is like $70, $69.99 and $70, and then all the DLC, you're gonna spend over $200 on Vanguard. And if you're playing Vanguard Gear Days 2, you most likely have the Vanguard cards in real life, and you already spent $4,000 for the Crimson Moons. So where's the money going to come from for playing Gear Days 2? It's not, you're just not going to play it. However, playing Gear Days 2 has quite literally been the most fun I've had with any TCG card simulator. Because I am a Vanguard fan, because I love the way that Vanguard plays, simply adding the defense step, right? Because Vanguard Zero, simply adding the defense step makes the game way, way, way more interactive, intense, and nerve-wracking, which is great. These are all great things. I feel that the Vanguard games that I play are intense, they're skill intensive, they're thoughtful a lot of the time. Even though the Vanguards themselves are kind of boring, playing against an opponent is really, really interesting. That we have the same goal as winning. Another thing, like I said in my last video, a lot of the cards are just kind of in Gear Days. Like a lot of the Vanguards are kind of just boring, but there's a lot of Vanguards that aren't as well. So you just got to see what kind of playstyle fits you. And then there's Vanguards in every nation that kind of do that playstyle. Unless you're an Overgrappler player, you're just fucked, right? But if you're somebody who likes to retire, there's decks like Eugene, right? And Eugene is a pretty bad deck. But the bad decks in Gear Days are really fun. The bad decks in the Divines era are really customizable, which I really, really love. You can do pretty much anything with those decks because there's barely anything on them online. Maybe they have 1 or 2 deck profiles. There is not a lot of ways you can net deck. And then it leads you to looking at all of the grade 1s, 2s, and 3s that the nation has to offer, and you're building your own original deck. So like for Vanguard, like time stamping, I'm sure you've never heard of it in the Divines or Gear Days era. But it's a Vanguard that exists. It does time leaping, kind of. And I have to create my own specialized version of the deck. Because not a lot of people even know that this Vanguard exists. And that, I find that interesting. I find that somewhat interesting about Gear Days. But if Gear Days could just be a little cheaper and a lot more faster, it would be the most premium way to play Vanguard online. I really think that being able to just hop on with these cards and play an actual game of Vanguard, despite it taking as long as it takes, like an actual game, guarding, defending, putting thought into it, and you put more focus into it than Vanguard Zero. And it feels a lot better to win than in Vanguard Zero. Because when you win in Gear Days, you know it's more because of your skill, or because of your filtering, or because of your defending, which is a big part of Vanguard. Defending is one of the most important parts. As opposed to Vanguard Zero, it's kind of just like rear guard, face, rear guard, face, rear guard, face. Gear Days allows the player to have that option on how they want to play, the play style that you want to portray, right? This is the last thing that I'll do, and then I'll hop off. So the playstyles in Vanguard Zero, while the decks themselves were more unique, the personal playstyle of the player never showed. Because of that lack of defense, because of the change of some of the effects, a lot of the decks may be just like flow charted, right? However, in Gear Days, they have kind of the opposite problem. A lot of the decks themselves are very flowchart, but playing the game, putting a person behind that deck is what makes the deck interesting because of the choices that they make, whether it be special techs or different ways of guarding or different attack patterns that make the deck much more interesting and unique, you know, that human element. So there is pros and cons to both. However, You can't play Vanguard Zero anymore, so I won't recommend that. But I would recommend, if you love Vanguard, if you just want to play it, if you have nobody to play it with, like in your immediate area, and you have to drive like 3 hours just to get to a locals, I would say pick up Vanguard Dear Days 2, right? Only get the DLC that you're interested in, and just play the game, because it's actually a really fun way, a really great way to get into Vanguard. And then again, because it's Dear Days 2, it's not no BCS, it's not no championship tournament, like you don't have to play your best deck. You can discover a lot of fun decks, a lot of fun cheap decks, and discover a lot of builds that you normally wouldn't have done. So I would recommend giving it a try, and I would also recommend subscribing to the channel. I think that's it for me. Hope you guys like these discussion videos. I want to do more of them. Have a good day. 3 a.m. Vanguard out.